Welcome to Managing Complex Tasks with the Double Loop Mutual Assessment System, or the DLMA. The DLMA is an online piece of software that facilitates group decision-making dealing with complex tasks. In particular, today I'd like to talk to you about the why, what, and how for educators as they try to employ the system in the classroom setting for instructional purposes. What is the challenge the DLMA addresses in the classroom? I myself am a faculty member, and I enjoy interacting with students, challenging their assumptions, going through the critical thinking, and looking at their conclusions that they reach through those sorts of processes. One of my favorite types of assignments to give are cases or essays, some form of written assessment where there are no right or wrong answers per se, rather it needs to be evaluated in the light of other information and making sure that they have cogent answers. Now that's very time consuming to grade these sorts of assignments, and it's really not my favorite activity to do. With that said, I do view it as being an essential activity. If we don't get to the critical thinking amongst our students, what is it we are really doing? The challenge becomes that after I've turned the papers back and moved on to my next class, I seem to be finding larger and larger class sizes facing me semester in and semester out. And pretty soon the paperwork grows so tall that there simply aren't enough hours in the day. And the question becomes, what am I going to do? I can't simply assign papers and then not grade them. Something else has to happen. How can I go about this? And this was the impetus for developing the double-looped mutual assessment system. I hope that you find the DLMA is a solution that may help you achieve some of your goals in your classes. What does the DLMA system do? Well, the first thing it does is it takes your class and it divides them into groups. You can do this either by purpose, in other words, assigning discrete individuals to the groups you want, or you can do it randomly. The system will allow you to do it either way. The next thing it does is it blinds the students. Hey, no peeking there. It's important that the students have anonymity amongst themselves in order to make sure no bias enters into the process. What does the process do? Well, this is where you've set it up on the DLMA system website. It will send each group an email telling them, here's your assignment. And from this point forward, the DLMA should facilitate the completion of the assignment all the way through the grading if you so choose. So in comes the DLMA. It sends the students the assignment to their computers, and then it tells them what the deliverables are. In most of our assignments, there's 3 discrete phases. The first one, in the example I'm giving, is an essay or a mini case, as we often do. The second deliverable will be feedback on their peers' essays, and the last part is rating or gauging the quality of the feedback you receive. Let me go into each of those in a little more detail. Let's think about this group of 6 students, with the red student at the top of the pyramid as being the one we're going to focus on, or their experience. All right? Every student submits their essay after having received it through the system and reading it and making a response. The DLMA will then take it and reprocess them out. So we see that the red student has received all 5 of their peers' essays, and now it's their job to go through, read them, rank them, in other words, which essay was most responsive to the assignment, which was least responsive to the assignment, and ranking is important, and I'll talk about that more momentarily. And also to provide that detailed feedback about what the paper's or essay's strengths and weaknesses were. So here we see the red student has actually completed the assignment and is now submitting their answer back to the DLMA. It has 2 elements, their answer. One is the narrative feedback for each and every respondent, and the second part is a ranking. And I force these rankings. In other words, there can only be one best paper, and at some point, some paper had to be the least responsive to the assignment. And this is important because students will often rank everybody as being the best. I call this the Lake Wobegon effect. If you've ever listened to A Prairie Home Companion with Garrison Keillor on NPR, you know what I'm talking about. And so forcing the ranking is important. With that said, many instructors don't want to have that full-on curve as part of their grading schema. You can change the grading schema to match onto whatever format you want, but it's important for the student's part that they rank. The DLMA then processes the material, and it'll also send back to the red student all of their feedback and the rankings of their peers. So now the red student gets to see all the qualitative components. I thought you did this well. You could do better by using bullet points. Your citations were lacking. The grammar was poor. Those sorts of things, as well as more qualitative elements about the essay itself. And you hope to actually have them engaged in what looks like a conversation. All right. They also get a sense of their ranking. The DLMA system at this point will send out the essay scores. It'll also give you something called the assessor reliability score. In other words, you as an instructor will know the reliability of each and every student as a grading mechanism of others. This is a concept similar to inter-rater reliability. You also get an assessee agreement score. What is an assessee agreement score? This is how much people agree about a particular student. So you may have a student that writes a very controversial paper that takes a very strong position that's either politically charged or in some other fashion, tends to activate the rest of the reviewers to either be very positive or very negative, and not necessarily judging them simply on the quality of the analysis. You'll see that come out in the assessee agreement score. Generally, however, people have very high assessee agreement if the assessor reliability is functioning properly. In other words, generally we agree about each other more than one might imagine. The last part, and to enforce the fidelity of the feedback system, we actually assign points to the quality of that feedback. So we ask the red student to go ahead and rate the quality of the feedback they received. In fact, in my classes, I usually make it 50% of the credit goes to the essay and 50% goes to the feedback that you give others as they score it themselves. And this puts a little skin in the game so that not every student says, great job, again, that Lake Wobegon effect. And here we call this feedback ranking part gauging. So the first part in deliverable 2, you get feedback where ranks are applied. When the feedback itself is then ranked, we refer to that as gauging, and these are simply nomenclature you need to be aware of. And you can see the rankings also follow a forced distribution. Again, we're always making sure that there's no bias entering in unnecessarily. The DLMA processes that, and again, the instructor gets scores for the feedback, and you get the reliability and agreement scores on the feedback too. So now you have two discrete pieces of information twice over. So you get the assessor and the assessee reliability indices twice. As I said, the student gets individual student summaries as well as a general sense of the class performance report, and the instructor gets all of these. The instructor also gets a content report where they get to see every individual student summary with all of the feedback linked. Within the system, at this juncture, if the faculty member or instructor wishes to, they can actually go in and provide additional feedback and commentary. For philosophical reasons, my recommendation is that you not go in and change scores from the feedback, because that degrades the fidelity of the system. Students have to know that their scoring matters in order for them to do it. My hope is at the end of this you have a happy group of students who understand a little bit more about themselves, because when they provide feedback to others, to teach is to learn twice, as we used to say, they too learn more about themselves. As well as you get a better feel for how people are doing in the class before you do your initial evaluation. So this should greatly streamline your experience, particularly in larger classes or in online sections where you don't get to see people, so that you can manage more complex assignments than you would normally be able to assign in a large class setting. Other options? You can non-anonymize the groups if you so select. You can also provide them with the scoring at every stage if you select. The challenge we see with providing the scoring and de-anonymizing is occasionally you get favoritism biases, as well as something we call tit for tat. If somebody sees that they were scored low by one particular student, they may provide a low score on that student's feedback. Random versus non-random groups. Again, for statistical reasons, we recommend randomization. However, if you run multiple assignments, which is what we recommend you do, several low-stakes assignments, in other words, 3 or 4 short essays that get evaluated. And by the way, as you do the third and fourth essay, you'll see the rates of agreement and reliability start to go up as students become much better, more discriminating consumers and provide better feedback both. So the system works in iterations very, very strong, in a very, very strong manner. The random versus non-random groups, you can also assign essays that build over time, and you may want to have non-random groups and you keep providing feedback after each iteration. Ranking versus relative comparisons or ratings. We also allow for ratings, in other words, Likert-like scales, where you say this paper was very responsive to the question. Strongly agree would be an answer. And they can answer, they strongly agree that every paper was responsive to the questions. With that said, you should always enforce the ranking as well. So you can have two forms of feedback. We recommend for grading purposes you rely on the ranking. For your information and for providing feedback from your perspective, use the ratings. So we've shown you some of the why, what, and how. 2 questions remain. When are you going to make your assignments both better, because you can do qualitative work that isn't normally available in a multiple choice test or some homework assignment with a discrete answer where all you have to look for is a particular number. Also, it makes it more manageable. It takes all of that paperwork management as well as the initial sorting and actually assigning grades and rankings to these assignments off your plate. In other words, it should make your life better. Who can you contact to take the next step? Well, that's us at www.CTASIT, that's CTASIT.com. My name's Eric Ford. I'm one of the developers of CTASIT.com, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help you. Thank you. Goodbye.